one of the most common gene mutations in the world is called MTHFR. It's called the motherfucker gene. Stands for methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase, but we call it the motherfucker gene. This gene is estimated to be compromised in somewhere between 40 and 60%, depending on the study. 40 to 60% of the population has this gene mutation. And what this gene mutation does is it interrupts the ability to convert folic acid into the usable form called methylfolate. And while that might not sound like a big deal until you realize that folic acid is the most prevalent nutrient in the human diet. Folic acid, by the way, is an entirely man-made chemical. You can't find folic. We've been lied to about folic acid. I mean, it's entirely man-made and synthetic. You can't find folic acid anywhere on the surface of the earth. It does not occur naturally in nature. Folate does, but we make folic acid in a lab. And then what we've done since 1993 is we've sprayed all of our grains, all white flour, all white rice, all white bread, and grains of any kind are sprayed with this chemical folic acid. It's called fortified or enriched. So when you spin a box of crackers around, it says fortified whole wheat flour or enriched bleached white flour. That means it's been sprayed with folic acid. Well, 44% of the population can't convert that into the usable nutrient.
Why do they spray it with folic acid?
Well, I mean, without going down the whole road of conspiracy theory, I mean, you look at the same, pharmaceutical companies that produce folic acid, and you look at some of the downsides of having a synthetic form of a vitamin like folic acid in the diet, and how it's correlated to higher incidences of ADD, ADHD, OCD, manic depression, bipolar. It's correlated to poor gut motility, mood imbalance, anxiety. And because when you put this raw material into the human body, if you can't metabolize it, if you can't methylate it into the usable form, first of all, you now have a deficiency in the form your body needs and an excess in the nutrient you can't process. And this causes things to go haywire.
So instead of folate, it's folic acid. And what does your body try to do with that?
So your body tries to convert folic acid eventually into something called methylfolate. There's a few steps in between tetrahydrofolate, dihydrofolate, but essentially folic acid and folate, which you can find all over the surface of the earth, gets converted into the usable form called methylfolate. Okay, now this is one of the most commonly utilized methylated nutrients in the human body. It helps downregulate neurotransmitters. It helps improve the intestinal motility of our gut. It helps degrade thought. It helps to actually break down catecholamines, which are fight or flight neurotransmitters that can actually stimulate thought. And so people will go a lifetime eating white bread, white flour, white rice, white pasta, breads and cereals of all kinds, and they're reading the label and they're like, wow, it's fortified, it's enriched. But fortified or enriched for 44% of the population means you can't break that nutrient down. And this is why there's a lot of evidence that getting folic acid out of the diet has immediate behavioral changes. I mean, if you're a parent and you're listening to this podcast and it's a full contact sport to get your kid in the car to go to school in the morning, look at what you're feeding them. The standard American diet is going to be like a Pop-Tart, a white bagel, a bowl of cereal, right? And all of those are fortified with folic acid. Well, there's a 44% chance your kid can't process that. And you're amping them up in the morning. It can literally be like cocaine for a 6-year-old, right? It could make their mind race. So now this kid gets up and he goes to the breakfast table and he has a Pop-Tart or he has a white bagel or he has a bowl of cereal. He dumps all this folic acid in the body and now his mind starts to ricochet, right? And it's a full contact sport to get him in the car. And then by the time they get to school, the call's coming home saying, hey, little Johnny can't pay attention. He doesn't focus. He can't concentrate. He doesn't follow directions. He can't pay attention.
Get him on Adderall.
Yeah, get him on Adderall or Ritalin. And, essentially what that does is it says, all right, well, if the mind is racing, then let's put an amphetamine into the body to race the central nervous system to match the pace of the mind, which is a horrible solution. How about we just quiet the mind? Right? Because, in our brains, we don't just create thought, right? We also dismantle thought. We break thought down, right? We transfer methyl groups from neurotransmitters and break them down so they no longer have an effect, right? Or else you'd always be in the same mood. So when we start creating thought at a faster rate than we break thought down, we call this ADD or ADHD, right? But it's not an attention deficit at all. In many of these cases, it's an attention overload disorder. It's too many windows open at the same time, right? So if we're opening too many windows, now all of a sudden we can't pay attention. So it's not that the majority of people with ADD or ADHD lack the ability to pay attention, because they actually can hyperfocus. They lack the ability to pay attention to so many things, right? So, you're thinking about a job you're working on and your friend walks up. And you're thinking about a job and you start talking to your friend and you notice a logo on your friend's jacket that reminds you of a vacation you want to take. So now you're thinking about a job, talking to your friend, looking at the logo, thinking about a vacation you want to take, all at the same time. And why is this? Because very often it's because you have slow breakdown, slow methylation of neurotransmitters. So thought comes in, and now all of a sudden we're like, this kid can't pay attention. This guy's all over the place. If you look at the link between that simple gene mutation, MTHFR, and its incidence in stroke, cardiovascular disease, its incidence in ADD and ADHD and OCD, you'll find not a direct causal link, but enough of a prevalence to say, why wouldn't we just take folic acid out of the diet, add methylfolate, and take a shot at correcting the course of these conditions?
So folic acid, when did it get introduced into the human diet?
1993 is, I think, when the federal government signed a deal to spray our entire grain supply with folic acid. I want to say it was 1992 or 1993, and I forget if it was Monsanto. I forget the pharmaceutical company that convinced the U.S. government to spray our entire grain supply. But before that date, like, you ever notice when you go to Europe and you eat bread in Europe, you don't feel like shit? Or you go to Italy and you have a bowl of pasta and you're like, man, normally when I eat pasta, I feel like shit. It just sucks. Okay, that's because it's not sprayed with folic acid.
Really?
Right?
Because I'd always been told that it's heirloom grains and that the wheat that we have today has been modified for higher yield, for smaller acreage.
Not
There's more complex.
Well, genetically modified, first of all, the GMO foods. So, Italy banned GMO foods. Russia, actually, it's a felony to grow genetically modified foods. So GMOs aside, and that's another thing. I mean, I tell people you got to get GMO foods out of your diet, right? We didn't genetically modify seeds to increase yield. We modified seeds to be resistant to glyphosate, right? The poison in pesticides.